What's going on, guys? So at the start of this one, I've leveled up to 100, and I've edited this down quite a bit. I've just been spending tons of time during this session staring at the tree, trying to figure out what I want to cut. I'm going to spend some of my gray pearls here, which is essentially just the game's way of letting you respec some of the points that you've spent into these various nodes in the talent tree. And on top of that, I'm spending the black pearls that I have, which is the game's way of letting you spend points into this tree. And what I've done here is I've cut one of my potion slots, and I had gone down this path to use class 1 shields, but as I played, I decided that I wanted to make a gun build rather than a sword and shield type build. So I kind of switched gears halfway through, and I am basically fully investing my points into that path. So I've taken all of my excess points out of shields, that side of the tree, and I'm pretty much now fully invested in the hunter part of the tree. And one thing about the talent tree is that it's really bloated with different nodes, but a lot of the nodes do the same things. And if I really had to name a disappointment, like a major disappointment in this game, I'd say it would be to do with the talent tree and, or the skill tree rather, and really just the overall build variety. And here's the thing with the tree. You're either putting points into a flat investment, in dexterity, strength, endurance, etc., or you are investing points into an ability to wear upgraded armor and weapons. And one thing that I learned in the game pretty quickly was that, for example, there's class 0 through 5 weapons and armor, and currently I'm using a class 3 sword on this build. It's called the Lowlander's Great Knife, if I'm not mistaken. It has an S scaling with dexterity, and I can tell you that I haven't run into a sword in the game that's class 4 or 5 that scales with dexterity. So I learned pretty early on, at least as far as I know, right? Because I can't really claim to be a vet in this game yet, but as far as I know, class 5 doesn't necessarily mean better than class 2 or class 3. It just means different. It just really means higher requirements is really all that it means. Some of the weapons that you get in class 5 are definitely powerful as hell. Like, for example, my pistol is a class 5 weapon. That's what the build is made around. It has an S scaling with dexterity. So, I guess I expected the game to be more like a Souls game in that no matter what weapon type you select, you're going to have a viable option at every level, right? So I expected there to be a slew of swords that scaled with dexterity. I expected there to be tons of daggers that scaled with dexterity. But in the end, it's really not like that. It's really just a couple swords might scale with dexterity. A couple daggers might scale with dex, and then all the rest scale with, the faith equivalent or magic or something like that. So they've, really provided a viable option for every build and every weapon. But as a result, you have this really bloated skill tree and it looks like you have all of these different options on your on the table. Lots of different paths to take, lots of different ways to specialize your character. But in the end, you really don't have that many options unless you want to spend quite a bit of points in one character and just have everything. Which it's highly possible that this game was designed more around that. But I guess coming from the Souls games and just really being so conditioned at this point in making builds and enjoying the process of making builds and having very specific themes and roles for all of my characters, I'm not going to do that shit. So I'm thinking that 100 is going to be where I stay on this guy. I don't see any point in leveling up beyond 100. Dexterity, for example, it doesn't stop scaling at 50, but the returns become incredibly minimal. I want to say I was getting something like 1.8 to 2 points of damage thereabouts per point of dexterity up to 50 points. And then once I started putting points beyond 50, I was getting something like 0.2 points of damage. So it became pretty obvious that I was going to be stopping leveling dexterity at that point. And endurance-wise, oddly enough, the hand cannon I have, the pistol I use on this build is my heaviest piece of gear. It weighs a ton. It absolutely weighs as much or more than most shields I've seen in the game. And a lot of the guns that I've seen are just a massive burden on you as far as equip load goes. So, that's really the main reason why I've had to pump my endurance up to 35. I will say that the armor I'm wearing is class 4. It is pretty heavy. I think that it's the heaviest or close to the heaviest set of light armor in the game. So a huge chunk of my equip burden goes to that as well. So oddly enough, and I didn't see this coming because I really wanted to make a really light and agile character, which is what I have here. But I did have to put quite a few points into endurance, a lot more than I had expected. And right here, actually, so I've encountered the shrine, right? And I'm about to desecrate it. And actually, just real quickly, the merchant started beating the hell out of me there. I did not expect that. I've desecrated sanctuaries in NG, right? But so I know what's coming here. But they hit a lot harder. They hit like 5 times harder, right? The merchants in the NG playthrough could barely dent my health bar. Basically, I could just stand there and just tank hits from them for probably minutes before dying. Whereas, my very first shrine, I tried to expunge here. The merchant just comes up and gets me to half health with a couple strokes. So I saw that and thought, oh shit, what's going to happen when the big boys start swooping in to kill me here, which is kind of what I'm dealing with right now. And so I had to put my game face on and do my best not to take too many hits. But the benefit of doing this, and this is one thing that I really like in Assault and Sanctuary, it's one of the ways in which it does its own thing and it adds to the foundation that the Souls games have. And I kind of touched on this in the first episode, and that I really like some of the unique Covenant items that you can gain in Salt and Sanctuary, which is a really nice personality touch. But on top of that, being able to desecrate shrines and convert covenants that are not your own into your own sanctuary is really beneficial for you. Because let's say I didn't desecrate this and decided just to use this shrine. If I were to rest at the shrine, I wouldn't get my unique covenant items anymore. I would be using the stranger covenant, right? And that's going to hurt me a little bit because I do have some really cool stuff at my disposal here. I have a weapon buff. I have these things called Flasks of Defilement, which put a debuff on my opponent. And on top of that, I also have an extra 2, blood vials, which are my healing items. So if I were to rest at this, this enemy covenant, basically, not necessarily enemy, but non-friendly covenant, I wouldn't be able to get all of those bonus items. So it's kind of a big deal. And luckily, I was able to survive there, although I did have some issues. Some of those guys are kind of tough to deal with. And, one way I found to deal with the heavily armored guys is to bust out my dagger, which is poison-based. And I'll just be as aggressive as possible and try to poison them. But actually, some of those enemies, especially the guys that are a lot more difficult to take out, they seem to have pretty high poison resistance. And typically, the really heavily armored opponents get poisoned quickly. But for some reason, these heavily armored knights, it takes a while for them to get poisoned. And if you end up trading hits with them while you're trying to rack up poison damage, it ends up not going in your favor more often than not because they hit like a truck. But yeah, successful attempt at expunging the first shrine. Not necessarily essential, but what I'm trying to do for this run, even though I've already leveled up in the Covenant quite a bit, I still need, I want to say there's still 2 more things I can do to get some more items. I'm not really sure what I'm going to do. I don't know if I'll get an extra healing flask, an extra couple healing flasks, or more of my consumable offensive-based items. I'm not really sure. So I think I only need to expunge or desecrate something like 3 to 5 more sanctuaries because the last couple turn-ins are going to require multiple desecrations. But it's not, it's not necessarily important for me. Certainly because I've primarily leveled up the Covenant at this point. It's primarily finished. But this little path down here is kind of a treacherous one. This is where you start to encounter traps, okay? And I just would like to point out that the traps in this game are incredibly well hidden. For instance, I'm about to walk into a freaking trap right now, and I know it. I'm looking on the ground like, where is it? Where is it? And I still can't fucking see it. I still get hit by it. During my first run, I got hit by that damn trap. When I first came in this area, this was really the first time I was like, okay, well, here's where the difficulty spike is in this game, because I encounter this, heavily armored knight for the first time, and I don't really know much about the game. I don't know how to parry really yet. I know about it, but I haven't really done it much yet. And I encountered this armored knight by that trap, and also with a couple dog creatures there. And man, I must have died probably a good 10 times before I, realized what it was I needed to do. But that's a really precarious area there, man. I mean, that trap combined with the 2 dogs, combined with the really tough enemy. And I can tell you, when you're going through the game on the first time, for the first time, it takes a lot more ripostes to take out that knight. During this run, it really didn't take much. He wasn't nearly as difficult to deal with. But during that first run, man, it's a trial. I mean, it took me something like 8 ripostes on him to actually take him out. It's no joke, man. Absolutely no joke. This whole area is, in fact, quite a difficulty spike. The archers in this area are super annoying. They're not as annoying as the archers in the upcoming area. Those guys can go to hell. I tell you what, man. They can just go to hell. And you'll see exactly what I'm talking about there. Whenever we get to that point. But yeah, we're coming to a close for this one. And before I get out of here, if there's anyone out there that's interested in Final Fantasy VI and Silent Hill 2 still, I plan either this weekend, because I'm going to have some free time on my hands this weekend to do whatever I want gaming-wise. Either this weekend or the following week, which I'm also going to be pretty freed up. I plan on either blitzing the rest of Silent Hill 2 or Final Fantasy VI. Right now, I'm leaning towards FF6, and here's why. I could finish Silent Hill 2 really quickly. I could just sit down for another, few hours, probably, and just finish up the game. But here's the thing. My capture cards right now, it's not a problem with my capture cards, I know that. It's a problem with my computer, because I use 2 different capture cards, right? I use my old one to record stuff for Silent Hill 2, because it's on the PS2, and I need the old, AV cables for that. And I use my new 1080p 60 FPS capture card to record stuff like, on the PS4, for example, and some PC games. So I use two different capture cards, yet really it started showing up towards the end of my Silent Hill 2 run, or towards the last couple episodes. I get these random video glitches that they just pop up and it fucks with like the video image for a second and then it just goes away. But when that happens during a cinematic, that's no good, man. And going back and re-recording that every time it happens is not a viable option. When it happens during a PvP clip, which I've had to cut quite a few as of late, that really made me salty. Actually, the last time I recorded for Bloodborne, I had to cut like 3 clips because just fate saw fit to give me those video glitches during some of my best moments, which ain't that some shit. But just real quickly before I get out of here, I'm putting down these merchants in this sanctuary, and it's going to allow me to do some really interesting stuff. I can interact with these merchants in different ways. They give me different passives just for being in the area. And I'll probably go into some more depth for this during the next episode. But I'm out of here, guys. Take care.